The story I'm about to tell you happened in the 90s, right around 1994. My husband worked in a warehouse that delivered furniture to stores, and I worked on cleaning houses. We made okay money from our jobs, but we always lived a bit of a limited life. At least we were able to keep a roof over our heads and food in the fridge. Definitely not rich by any stretch. The family that owned the warehouse my husband worked for was pretty wealthy. And what was really nice was that they had this house up in Big Bear. I cleaned it for them whenever they came back from family outings up there. Whenever that happened, we would have a family outing of our own. They would go there at least 4 times a year, so that meant we would go 4 times too. We would always plan it so that we would leave on Thursday and come back on Monday morning. The family knew we did this. It was actually their idea. We'd spend most of our time there relaxing, living it up like we could not do at home. Our daughter was young in those days, so I loved the idea of taking her out into nature, the fresh air, the trees, taking her on walks. It was nice. We enjoyed ourselves until the last day before we would leave. On that day, I'd start cleaning. One summer, I had to go clean up the house after a 4th of July party that the family had hosted. My daughter was about 4 or 5. We left at noon, got there around 7. The house was 3 stories tall. The living room and kitchen were on the 2nd floor. The bedrooms in the 1st and 3rd floors. My daughter's favorite was the 1st, because it had a room with a trunk full of toys and games. The house was pretty secluded, with an open backyard that if you would walk far enough, you would eventually reach a lake. You could even see it from the 3rd floor balcony. Anyway, one night, my husband went to bed early, but my daughter could not sleep. So I let her play downstairs with some of the toys. I was upstairs in the living room, watching TV. She comes running into the room, crying. I asked her what was wrong, if she was hurt, but she was scared. She said she saw something just outside the window, that a big dog growled at her. I told her not to worry, and that she probably just saw some stray animal. I asked her to show me, but she did not want to. I was surprised, to be honest. My daughter loves animals, but this really scary dog had her shook up. I kissed her, told her to head upstairs to Daddy, and I would check it out, make sure it was gone. She went upstairs, and I went downstairs. The 1st floor had a deck out on the back, looking over the yard. I slid open the door leading outside and turned on the lights. There was an awful smell out there, like sulfur or urine, whatever it was. It was strong and stung the back of my nose. I looked down, noticing the deck was wet, but it had not rained for days. But what really got me was what I saw on the deck. Footprints. They were like a dog's, but 2 things stood out to me. First was the overall shape. They had the shape of a paw, but much bigger. Longer too. And secondly, the footprints themselves. Whatever this was, it was not walking on 4 legs, but on 2. I wasn't sure in the dark, but the way they were spaced didn't look like a dog, like my daughter said. The prints went across the deck, down the steps. I went inside to grab a flashlight. I wanted to check to see if it was trying to get into the garage or the garbage cans. I followed the prints to the end of the deck and down the stairs where I saw the ground was damp, following the footsteps all the way to the front of the house, where they suddenly stopped. I stood there for a while, looking into the dark and listening. Soon, I heard a rumble above me. I shined my light towards the roof, which sloped down, near to the ground, and saw it, there, sitting on shingles. It had this face like a German shepherd, but much bigger, It was dripping water. Its ears were upright and sharp, sort of like a bat's, but thinner. The eyes were shining bright yellow, like hot embers, and it was growling at me. I couldn't see clearly and thought it might be a rabid dog. I began yelling, waving my arms around to scare it, hoping that if I pretended to be bigger, that it might just run away. Then this mangy-looking creature stood up on its two hind legs. It towered over me from the roof, like three of me put together, and it was very angry, teeth bared. With my flashlight, I was able to make out its body. It had a broad white chest, but it wasn't completely hairy. It was like it had mange, with part of its arm red, like it had been wounded. It was stripped almost entirely of hair, and the eyes, with the light on them, looked like they were glowing. At that moment, I was petrified. I thought I was in a nightmare. A demon from another world, staring right at me. It felt like I stood there, frozen for an eternity. Finally, I took a step back, but tripped and fell on my back. The flashlight fell to the ground, and I lost all visibility I had on this thing. All I could see was a silhouette from the faint moonlight. I started shuffling backwards, trying not to make any sudden moves that might agitate it, whatever it was. Then, it jumped, maybe 10 feet in the air, or more, over the top of me, landing behind me and taking off running into the forest. I scrambled up quickly, ran to the front door, and hurried inside as fast as I could, locking the door behind me. I started up the stairs, noticing my daughter coming downstairs to see me. She asked if the scary dog was gone. The whole ordeal left me sweaty, trembling. I told her, yeah, it's gone. Everything's going to be okay. From that day on, I was scared there. My wife would always ask why I was on edge when we went to Big Bear. We even had fights about it. Eventually, the arguments stopped when the family sold the house, but what happened there never left my mind. What I saw that day was the stuff of nightmares, the stuff you see in horror movies. It was a moment that felt so unreal, but real at the same time. People might say I had a misidentification, but you tell me, with everything I described to you, what other animal could it have possibly been? I know what I saw. I live in a ridiculously small town in Vermont, called Jay, right alongside the Canadian border. Aside from the town having very few businesses, we are entirely overshadowed by Jay State Forest and Jay Peak. We're pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It was Christmas Day, and just me and my single mom. I'm not a child anymore. A teenager, yes, but I'm not exactly jumping up and down for Christmas to come. We knew this year would be quiet, so we just lined up a few movies to watch, made 2 steaks for dinner. In this part of Vermont, it was not uncommon to see a moose or a deer family come through from the forest past our home. The town was quieter than usual, just due to the holiday. This brought down more raccoons and bears than usual, looking for food in the cold Vermont winter. Hearing the bashing of trash cans became part of everyday life, and this Christmas was no different. We FaceTime with my sister, who is currently living in New York City. We also spoke to an aunt in California. The day was fairly ordinary, and the food was good, but again, dinner, just like any other day. We gave each other a few gifts, but even felt that was underwhelming. I was looking forward to my mom going to sleep, so I could play video games and not feel like I was ignoring her. The PlayStation was in the living room, which overlooked the road in the front of the house. On the opposite side of the road was where the forest is. The television sat in the corner next to the window, so it is hard to not see movement outside, even when you're sucked into a game. Around 11 p.m. at night, after Mom had been asleep for a while, I heard more trash cans banging around in front of the house. I had taken the trash out earlier, and the dinner scraps were in there. I figured it was a raccoon, trying to get whatever was left on the bones to bring back to its family. But as I tried ignoring the noise, it just got louder, like something was digging to the bottom. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement and could tell that it was not a raccoon. Probably a bear. I thought I should look so I could make sure whatever it was. Chances were good that it was just run away if I scared it, that it would not get aggressive or try to come for the house. I told my friends that I was playing with virtually, that I needed to step away because something was getting into our trash. They laughed. None of them live anywhere near as remote as us. I laughed with them because I watch animals dumpster dive all day. My laughing stopped, though, when I saw what was actually outside. Pulling aside the curtain, I could see something very human-like, bending over into the trash can. Human-like, but completely covered in fur. It was definitely not shaped like a bear. My breathing must have become heavy. One of my friends could still hear me, and began asking if I was all right. All I could say was that I needed them to hold on one more second. As if it heard me, the creature emerged from the garbage can and stared directly into the window. Its eyes were glowing, and its face was hideous. It was like a werewolf, but more man-like than dog-like. It stood on its hind legs, looked about 7 feet tall from what I could see. I could not take my eyes off it. The creature wiped its mouth, or whatever, and he was tearing through in the garbage, and continued staring at me. I couldn't think, and had forgotten that I had my friends on the headset. They were trying to get my attention, but all I could do was stand there, thinking that earlier, I was seeing things, or I was going to die. I noticed that the Christmas lights from the window were still on, as well as the tree. I put my controller down, reached for the plug, not taking my eyes off this thing. He looked angry, as if me looking at him disturbed his meal. He appeared as if he would pounce if I were standing outside, closer, in arm's reach. I pulled the lights out of the wall, and it appeared to startle him. He jumped a bit, knocking over the trash can and making a loud noise. I heard my mother jump out of the bed, so she must have heard it too. Just then, he took off in the direction of the forest. My mother came downstairs, staring at me silently in shock. She must have seen it too, but didn't know if I had, and did not want to scare me. My friends, who were still on the headset, trying to get my attention, I snapped out of it, told them I had to go. We both went outside to pick up the trash and the trash can. The whole time we did not say a word to each other. I don't know how much she saw, but I know that I saw a lot. I don't even like living here anymore. I've already made plans to move down to the city and go live with my sister. It's probably better than being around here where this thing lives. Hopefully, it doesn't ever get me. Wish me luck.